You're listening to Shoe-In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Polk.
Welcome back to the Shoe-In Show, folks. The Shoe-In Show is really great because oftentimes we get to amplify unique voices, unique insights, unique ideas that may not often be heard or may not be mainstream, but I think are really important in this day and age of being wise. We talk a lot about data, collecting data. But what good is the data if we're not wise about it? What good is the business operations we're doing if we're not having a critical thought to questioning why we're doing the same thing we've been doing for 20 years? Questioning how we can do things a little bit better, questioning why our consumers are changing and how to do that. And obviously every day we have really great people across the industry working every day on these different things. But this show is something really unique where you can take 30 minutes and think about something a little bit differently or add something to your job that helps you do your job faster, quicker, easier. And that's what the podcast is really all about. So today is one of those great shows where we have a unique shoe philosopher, shoe thinker, shoe doer that often is not heard that we think you should be listening to. So Matt, who we got?
We got Chris Burns, my good friend, who's been on the program before, and Chris and I have been on the phone and on Shoe-In Show a number of times throughout the years and never met in person. But Chris, you and I broke bread twice, not once, but twice over a 3-day period in New York during Market Week last December. And Chris, thanks for coming on Shoe-In Show. Your website, as founder of Arch USA, your website is just chock full of so much good analysis. I mean, you just can't get this analysis anywhere else. And this being March Madness, we're in the middle of the world's greatest sports tournament, and you being
whoa, World Cup.
You being a former baller, have a lot of insights both on the personal side, but also the professional. So, Chris, welcome back to Shoe-In Show, man. We're ready for some of your hot takes for sure.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm glad to be here, and it's always good to kick it with the fellas.
All right, so let's get the lay of the land, man. What are like the three things that are on your mind for our industry right now? We're in March Madness. We're thinking about basketball. We're thinking about the collabs and the athletics industry and all the ways in which the landscape is shifting under our feet. And you're always pointing those things out in really creative ways on your website. So hit us up with like some of the things on your mind right now.
There's a lot of stuff on my mind, but you guys are on my mind, FDRA, because of the supply chain issues.
Yeah.
First and foremost, no one, if you go to any sneaker site, they're not talking about the supply chain issues. And they keep wondering why all of this stuff and these releases are getting pushed back. But they're not talking about the supply chain. And that's because they're not members of FDRA and they're not connected to people who are members of FDRA. Enough of the pitch. But it's real. It's true. And the biggest issue is in sneaker, not the biggest issue, but one of the issues is in sneaker culture, we're not looking at all of the things that are happening. And because we're missing a lot of opportunities for ourselves and for people that we know who are talented, who may be looking for work. I would have to be nailed down with questions to get me to what is most important right now. Because like you said, we're in February, Black History Month. We know that Pensole and all of these different places, Pensole is getting ready to launch their first masterclass. They reopened the historically Black college. That's a big topic that should be discussed. It's February. We're heading into March Madness. All of the state championships in basketball in high school and middle school are being played. And then the colleges are ramping up and the junior colleges are ramping up all the way across the board. So we got basketball. All-Star Weekend was this past weekend. There's just a ton of stuff that we can discuss. But in particular, I mean, I think, with the March Madness stuff, it goes hand in hand with injuries and basketball. So you guys pepper me with questions and I'm ready to talk. I've written so much in the last like 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. I've written so much that it's almost overwhelming. And Matt Kish over at the Business Insider, he's getting ready to run an article on Reebok. And he interviewed me for that article. We talked a bit. So there should be a couple of quotes in there. And it's really this discussion on where Reebok is headed. So you got Pensole, which I'm not a part of. I just covered it and announced some of the different things that are happening. You got the March Madness, you got All-Star Weekend, you got Reebok, you got the supply chain issues. What isn't happening right now? It's just,
I know.
Oh,
throw in, you're a resale guy, throw in NFTs and the Nike lawsuit against StockX. That's a whole different thing.
Well,
we can almost do a number of segments on these.
You bring in a tech guy as the CEO, right? You have John, who comes in, and tech guys are about IP.
Yep.
Nike's always been litigious. Always been litigious. Nike has always been a company that sues everybody.
It's got a lot of IP.
Oh my gosh. But it is ramped up to a completely different level now. And because we're in this technical phase and Nike has had so much IP, trademarks, patents, it's elevated because things are happening so quickly. But as far as NFTs, and you got your StockX and the resale side of it, which God knows I'm trying to get away from. But, I'm like, every time I get out, they pull me back in.
I'm making an offer you can't refuse.
And that's what happens every time. I'm like, I'm done. I want out. I'm training up my younger associates. I'm like, you guys got this. I'm done. I'm going to focus on the company. I'm going to be an analyst. I'm going to write papers. I'm going to go speak to these brands. And the brands don't call. So I end up going right back to what it was. And the funny thing about resale is it's dead. It's dead. It only exists for people like me who live in an area where we have 3 Nike stores, or if you live in an area where there are a considerable amount of shoe outlets, there's no resale. There's not a lot of new resellers. You can see it in the fact that like eBay just brought the prices back, the fees back for sellers. So for a couple of years when they announced no seller fees and they were big and promoting that, well, they had to announce now we're bringing back these seller fees. Why? Because the majority of their sellers are old sellers, guys that have been around for a long time. When you don't have an influx of new young blood, vampires die. And that's not saying that eBay was a vampire, but even StockX and third-party marketplaces, they're all leeching off of retail.
Yeah.
And the only way you can leech off of retail if there is a continuous stream of new blood flowing in and the leech gets to get fat. And right now, that's not happening.
I'm interested. That does make me hungry for like garlic bread for lunch. So maybe
not the leech or the
blood. You talked about supply chain. What's obviously like the launches, the product launches, and all these other things that typically resellers really look forward to because you get limited product, you drive up price. With the supply chain, what's happening with the resale market because of the supply chain?
Well, we talked about this before, but it's been trending down for years. The supply chain only expedites the process of resale trending down. Because if all of these ships are sitting off the coast of Long Beach and they're just circling because they can't get into port, all of that product's sitting on the water. So now those release dates are getting pushed back. So Nike has to go into the reserves wherever they may have reserves and roll out these exclusive access or shock drops, anything to keep the sneaker culture involved because the sneaker culture buys the shoes at a higher price. And then it keeps a lot of conversation around sneakers. But because the supply chain is so thrown off, and I read a note from Sam Poser.
Yeah.
I read a note and he downgraded almost everybody. because everyone thinks the worst of the supply chain issues are over.
Right.
And they aren't. That's from you guys. You guys know. And
Matt said that, not me. Matt
yeah.
said that.
I mean, it's one of those things where it's like you guys are aware of what's happening. And I'm attempting to be this bridge between brand, retailer, sneaker culture.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have enough influence on sneaker culture. I don't have a big enough reach to get to the brands. And I can only hit retail in my region. So I don't have the ability to talk between all of these different places and explain what's happening. And I think a lot of people are trying to figure out what's wrong. And because they're not a part of these different organizations and they're not listening to the right people, they're getting data, but that data is not informed on every aspect of the market.
I mean, Chris, let me just devil's advocate a little bit. I mean, everyone and their grandma knows about the supply chain issue problem, right?
No, they think they know.
But is that an excuse at this point? If something's delayed, like common sense, like, oh, a drop is delayed. It's not because they are tinkering it with more or they got to get one last swoosh somewhere. It's like, people just know this at this point? It's why things are delayed?
No, people don't know. And they hear it, but they don't grasp that a ship, I lived on a ship for a year and a half.
Yeah.
I was in the Navy.
Hi, Captain.
Yeah. We sit out there. Sometimes we don't hit a port for 8 weeks. Especially if you're on a big ship, like I was on the Lincoln, which is an aircraft carrier, and we can't dock just anywhere. We have to dock way out, and then we have to take boats in when we want to get off of the boat. So ship, I know somebody's going to be like, it's not a boat. It takes time for these ships to travel from X to Z or A to Z, right? And I think sneaker culture gets so bogged down with, this is where sneaker culture has kind of hurt the entire market because they get leaks of new pictures and images of these shoes 6 months ahead of time. And they're waiting and waiting and waiting, and they're building it up and they're sharing the same pictures over and over again on these websites. And now that the supply chain is backed up and the stuff is not hitting when it's supposed to, now everybody's kind of in a huff and they're like, oh, they're just holding it or somebody's backdooring it. So you get this gigantic conversation about sneaker stores backdooring shoes. Yeah. And
Shoe conspiracies.
It's not happening. This stuff isn't happening. Nobody's backdooring these shoes anymore.
Shoe-anon fault.
Shoe-anon.
It's basically Shoe-anon. Yeah. So you got these dudes, man, and they're coming up with these conspiracies, and it's like, that's not what's happening, man. This is simple math. It takes X months for it to get across the ocean, and if you can't get into port, you can't offload. And that's it. But what's happening even more is that resale is so pervasive. StockX broke the entire system. And I use StockX. I can't sit up here. It's a beautiful website. But it broke the entire system. So in 2016, 2017, when StockX began to rise, it broke resale. Resale used to be about connections, activity, access, how much money you had, and how long you could sit on a product, and if you could deal with returns. All right, so you had to be a business person. It wasn't a hustle. It was a hustle because it's based on you buying something from somewhere else and selling it to somebody. It's a hustle from that standpoint. But you had to understand photography, understand customer service, understand returns, understand chargebacks, claims, all of these different things that took place on third-party marketplaces prior to StockX. But at StockX and GOAT and these new third parties that removed your interaction with the customer, when they removed that and made it so that an immediate bid could be placed and taken at the same time, the level of business acumen that people needed to be a part of resale,
Zero.
down to zero. So what happens when what's his name, Syndrome in The Incredibles. What happens when Syndrome makes everyone super? Nobody's super. So everybody's at the same level now. It doesn't matter if I got $100,000 to spend on sneakers. A guy with $100 can walk into a store, see that it's selling, and he can buy it, and he's going to start doing that because it's so easy. Before, you had to research, make sure that was something that you wanted to buy because it might not sell as quickly. Now you simply go, you see what it's selling for. If it's good, you buy it, you ship it. You don't interact with the consumer, nothing. The business.
You don't even authenticate it. So let me tell you this, let's go back to the NFT thing real quick. And then I do want to talk about performance in basketball as well. It's common sense, man. I don't care if it's digital or physical. It's common sense to know that if you're not the owner of the swoosh and you create a digital asset and you try to sell it on your website as the original owner, that's violating IP. That's why this court case is really fascinating to me, because it'll be the bellwether going forward as to how all this stuff is treated in the metaverse, right?
Yeah.
And to me, it's like, I guess, and StockX had to know. They had to know, all right, we're going to do this thing, and it may be the cost of doing business. We're going to get sued like crazy, but let's just get out there and see what happens. But it's common sense. It's a Nike product, even if it's digital. I mean, you don't own it. So how do you think you can create that and get away with it? It makes no sense.
Well, you're talking the same thing. NFTs, custom shoes.
Right.
John Geiger, La La Land, all being sued by Nike.
Right.
Yeah,
right?
I saw that too.
Yeah. So NFTs on StockX, same thing. You're creating these digital products.
Is it the same thing, though, if you're creating a digital product of an original Nike design? It's one thing to do customization post-sale, right, or whatever.
Yeah.
And we can get into that if you want.
Well,
but to me,
remember, John Geiger's not customization. John Geiger has his own logo. He simply used the shoe as inspiration, and Nike still is suing the dude.
Right. Well, then, let's set that aside, because I want to stick to the NFT part.
Yeah.
If you take like an Air Jordan 3 and you create the NFT for that, and you're not Nike or you're not Jordan, that just doesn't seem like that's not your right to do from an IP perspective.
Well, and the thing is they kept theirs on an internal blockchain. Although you could, it is, I'm not going to say authenticated, but it is on Ethereum, where you have to go to Etherscan and you can check to see if the sale is there.
Right.
It's not on the blockchain out here.
Right.
It's on an internal blockchain, and it's attached to a physical product. Which everybody overlooked was the idea that if StockX is attaching their NFTs to a physical product, that means StockX has an inventory of shoes. Completely overlooked in this discussion.
Right.
So I think some of that stuff is marketing, right? It's like attention, like maybe they thought they can get away with it, but we see a lot of people who are happy to have the attention of the lawsuit and pay out the lawsuit and consider it out of their marketing budget.
But that's not smart for StockX, because they're walking into an IPO soon.
Right, right.
Well, can you imagine the hits on the website after that was announced? And then I don't know, was there increased bidding on the NFTs?
Well, you know what? Well, this is the thing. StockX has been the fastest growing website in the sneaker industry for the 4 years that it's been around. You're talking 3 million visits a year in 2017, 3 million, 4 million visits a year. It's at 40 million now.
Oh my gosh.
There is not, and this is the crazy thing, they don't need that. If you've grown that much, Foot Locker, for example, I think is only at 10 or 11 million visits a year, and they have 3,000 stores. You get what I'm saying here? They didn't need that. So it's not a marketing thing. It was possibly a cash grab. We don't know. But they understood that it was a Nike logo that they were, they understood it. I transcribed an entire conversation from a sneaker industry kid with the people from StockX that were on his podcast or on his Twitter space. I transcribed that thing. and they wouldn't get into certain details. They knew it was problematic.
Yeah.
They did it because everyone's doing it and everyone's riding a wave. But if you are StockX, you have no products. So how do you ride the wave of NFTs and get your community interested in discussing that? You create your own version of it. It wasn't a smart thing to do. They did not have to do it. But I think because so many people were talking about it, they simply wanted to be a part of the dialogue. And I think that
it's not a good idea to eat garlic bread every day for lunch, but I do it anyway sometimes. So it's irrational. I want to expand on this too, though, because I do have questions. You wrote a book and you write extensively about direct-to-consumer and the changing business model of Nike and others.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to know, and you've also talked about how Nike's changed their model. They pulled out of some of these independents, and then Fila's come in, and these other sneaker companies have come in, and they've done quite well. I'm wondering, from your perspective, if that direct-to-consumer is going to shift into another gear around digital, and Nike makes less products in 10 years and more digital assets.
Nike filed a trademark in not a trademark, but a patent in 2016, 2017. I can't remember the year, for a 3D print where you could actually print your own shoes at home if you had a 3D printer. People don't know that. Nike has been...
Wait. FDRA members know this because we provide an IP digest every month where we track all the patent design and trademark filings every single month for the footwear industry, and you get that report in your inbox. So we do know this.
You know that. People don't know that. Nike's been leaning towards, they've been working on it. They are always going to produce what they're producing. I don't think you're going to, if there is a decrease, it will be a decrease because of circularity.
Mm-hmm.
So the circular economy will come into play, and the decrease will happen because Nike will begin to utilize refurbished, right? You know, refurbished just launched, which was the what was it, Reskew. I always said that Reskew was Nike. And then when refurbished was announced, Reskew was closed down. So you have refurbished and you have the circular economy that people have to become a part of. We're producing too many goods. So digital allows us to produce less and still make money. So this drop that's coming up with Artifact, the Nike drop with the big mystery box, the NFT mystery box, that thing is going to be explosive. And if it does well, you could see a decrease in footwear production under the guise of being more sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
However, that's a lie. And this is where I keep saying I want to talk to these brands and retailers, but because I have access to this store of information, when Adidas did their NFT drop, it was equivalent to producing 15 million miles of driving. Carbon dioxide created was like 15 million. An NFT minted on the blockchain and then sold or traded on the blockchain creates so much carbon dioxide because it's so power intensive. Mm-hmm. And that's because you have, proof of work and proof of stake. Now, NBA Top Shot utilizes proof of stake. They're a bit better as far as NFTs. And if everybody kind of followed suit with Dapper Labs, then you'd have a different discussion happening. But they're not, because everybody's using proof of work on the blockchain. They're so, just because Nike reduces the amount of shoes they make, they'll still make as much with these digital shoes, but they are doing an equal amount of damage to the ecology and the environment.
Isn't it amazing? It's so fascinating. People think it's digital. There's like no impact on anything.
Well, we see it. Matt and I see it. We're like 80% of the world's internet traffic flows through my backyard. The data centers are expansive, and they suck up electricity, and they generate heat, and I think that's the one thing we miss is we think the digital is the end all be all, and it is better, but there's still effect. There's still impact. And
Huge
if you're mining
impact.
Bitcoin, if you're mining the Bitcoins, then it's even more, right? You got these towns in like Idaho who are these people are setting up shop and setting up these and they're pulling so much energy. The town's having a problem keeping up with these like little miners trying to get 1 Bitcoin out.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
It's insane that sneaker companies are being involved because they already produce a lot of carbon dioxide. Through the manufacturing of the sneakers, they already are
right.
The transport of the sneakers, shoes coming across the ocean.
Can we talk about those brands filling in on the direct-to-consumer side and those independent stores? Maybe you can mention that and then pull in Reebok, because I know you post, Reebok's had a transformation, new buyer, Shaquille O'Neal, but some of their talent's leaving.
ABG.
Authentic brand groups, yep.
Can we touch on some of that about the independent channel shift and then also the Reebok transformation?
The independent channel shift, store in Mississippi just lost their Nike account. They're panicking. Obviously, anybody that loses Nike, they panic. They're like, "Oh man, we're losing our cash cow." Eblin's, the East Coast stores, about 50 stores, 49 stores, right? Eblin's lost Nike last year. Lost them at the same time as DSW, and we got to talk about DSW too, because these holes that are being filled by some extremely creative measures. And once again, if I want to be on the sneaker side, brand, retail, I'm trying to explain this to sneaker side, but they don't care because it's not pretty. But Eblin's lost Nike last year. Eblin's is opening 3 new stores. Now, your immediate thought was Eblin's is going to have to contract because they've lost Nike. They lost the cash cow. They deal with the cash customer. They're in a different space. They really need Nike. They do not. And they've grown to 3 new stores. How did Eblin's pull that off? I'm trying to find out. And I've been looking at it. But one of their previous store managers suggested 2 years ago to open a store in a location, I think in Danbury. So he made that suggestion, and they are opening a store in that location now. He understood something. The managers in these stores understand something about their stores that the brands don't understand. And in many cases, the C-suite people in their own company don't understand. So the people in the stores get it. They know what the people want. If the buyers are engaging with the store managers and listening, stores can survive without Nike. And Nike, I don't think they ever thought about this aspect as they started to leave these stores. So what happened with a lot of these stores that lost the account? They ramped up with other brands. So we saw Puma have $7.7 billion. Puma has never been $7.7 billion. They are bigger than they've ever been. There's no coincidence as Nike pulls away, Puma starts coming up. Now, Fila is owned by Anta, Chinese brand, which gets us into a totally different discussion on Chinese nationalism. So I don't even know if we want to go there.
Not yet, because we only have like 2 or 3 more minutes.
Right,
and it doesn't sound like we're going to get to basketball at all.
Let's jump back to Reebok. We'll get to basketball. I'll transition to basketball because this will be a good segue. Reebok is interesting because they just announced that they are going to do these special releases with Foot Locker. Well, they've been doing special releases with Foot Locker. The Billionaire Boys Club Reebok question came out last year. There have been several different questions that dropped. The Kamikaze, the USA Kamikaze, the the Pump, Omni. All of this stuff is at Reebok. They even have
D Brown, baby, D Brown.
Yeah, so Reebok and Kirby, I found out that Kirby left a couple of days ago. And that shook me because I'm like, oh, if Kirby's leaving, then they're not going to be as creative as they've been during the process of trying to sell the company as Adidas was trying to sell it. But more important with Reebok, and so we can switch gears here, My fear with Reebok is that the licensing is going to undercut the brand.
Mm.
And that's something, once again, that a lot of people don't understand. Licensing, I understand it because I lost a license and it ruined me. But licensing, they've licensed the Reebok brand out to every region. Asia, Europe, South America. This thing is licensed all over the place.
It's like the Fila model. Yep.
It's the same. But Fila is interesting. Once again, that goes back to the Chinese nationalism because they're owned by Anta, and Fila is being propped up by the Asian market.
Right.
So Fila is doing better. Fila in the United States has the worst merchandising and distribution process. They're horrible because they're in places where their product is just thrown on the floor, almost in a cheap flea market outlet style. And then they have accounts with Foot Locker where they have this really nice product, and Foot Locker is going to have a tough time selling it because right down the hallway, there's a whole floor full of Fila on the ground selling at $19.99. So Fila is a different thing, but Puma is the beauty mark. That's the one that's really nice in all of this stuff where Nike's crushing it down. Real quick, DSW Gyms, the manufacturer of Pensole.
Yep.
DSW does not go into, in my opinion, a relationship with Gyms or with Pensole if Nike doesn't cut them off last year.
Interesting.
That's me. You hear that anywhere else, they stole it. So we'll leave that.
StockX and an NFT.
So we can get back to that too, but let's jump to basketball before we run out of time because we're almost done, aren't we?
We got like 1 minute, so.
And I'm spinning.
Let's bring you back, man. Let's bring you back.
Man, yeah, I hate the 1 minute. Basketball, gosh, we should have got to that. That's my fault.
No worries, man. You're just so chock full of wisdom. As Andy started our conversation talking about that, we really appreciate it. So we'll have you back. You come back, right?
Oh, that's cool, man. Do you mind if I record? I recorded this. I can cut it up and do some stuff with it if you want me to.
Yeah, do what you want, man. Go for it. Cross pollinate. All right, Andy, take us out, brother.
I guess there's basketball occurring, apparently a lot. I do think you need to go and follow Chris on LinkedIn and go to his website. I think there's a subscription model for the deeper dives. And I'd encourage anybody in footwear that are interested in these kind of
took it off, man.
you took it off?
I took it off. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was just
so free access. Chris is also available for consultations. So what's great about Chris is he has opinions. He has a way to look at things. You can take it or leave it, but don't leave the conversations on the table. We need more conversations to figure out what's happening and what's shifting. And if you can glean one or two different things off those conversations, it can be really meaningful to how you manage operations and manage your brand. And so, again, we encourage you to talk to Chris. He's available for consults, for other things. You may not always like what you hear, but you're going to hear something unique and interesting, and I think meaningful to how we look at the environment of footwear, the footwear marketplace in different segments in different ways. So, Chris, thanks as always for coming on. We'll have you back for sure. Folks, shoeandshow.com. You can catch all our episodes on shoeandshow.com, our website. Go back into the library and pull out anything and everything that is related to your job or your interest to learn more about our industry. The solutions are still very, very relevant, even as a couple of years ago. As we always say, a lot of these conversations are about leadership and about critical thought, and ideas from the past are still as relevant as they are today. Even if we talk about certain data points in the past, maybe a little bit stale, the ideas around trend lines are still very, very relevant. So please use that. I think what we're building here is kind of a canon for the footwear industry. And what's really cool is that if you go back and listen to the early COVID conversations we had with leaders, it's really fascinating from where we are within that time period of our lives to where we are today, and how the businesses today are reflective of that change and what those leaders were thinking about. Even like Dick Johnson, even with David Kahn, the CEO of Birkenstock, was on talking about how they are thinking things through and how that's impacting us today. So I think there's some foundational discussions that can really help us understand from when COVID hit to where we are today about how things are changing in the industry. So we're doing the best we can in terms of bringing unique voices, unique ideas, best practices, tips, and solutions. If you have ideas on folks we need to have on our show or things we need to talk about, we're happy to do that. This is the Footwear Industries Podcast. We're a democracy here, so just drop us a line at info@FDRA. Or on the website, on the bottom left, there's a little voice note on shoeandshow.com. You can actually drop us a voice note. You can comment on these shows too and completely say you guys are full of it, and we'll show it on air, and then we'll hit back at you, right? We'll have a little hate session. So that's fun too. Anything you want to do. Again, thanks very much for listening. Until next time, Shoe-In is out.
Shoe-In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.